Hi everyone, and welcome to the Hastings Public Library Adult Summer Reading Program. I am so excited about this. Dr. Morfeld from For Elephants, which is a nonprofit out of Nebraska about conservation with elephants, right here in Nebraska. This is so cool. And she is going to do a presentation for us. I am so excited, you guys. I'm getting goosebumps. So, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Morfeld.
Thank you. Thanks to the Hastings Public Library for having me. This is always so exciting and such an honor always to talk about elephants, especially elephants in Nebraska. So I'm going to talk about that story. So I'm going to talk to you about a little bit about the journey of why we established this nonprofit, what it is we do, and why we are based in Nebraska. So we just were established in January of 2019, so we're fairly new. Nothing like starting a nonprofit right before COVID. But like many businesses, we're very persistent and passionate and committed to keeping this going. And so I'm just really excited to share a bit about this journey and what we do and how you can help and how you can be part of this journey. So I have some slides to show you. So I'm a scientist, but I'm also I'm an educator. And so I'm going to show you a lot of cool pictures, right? All of that. But I'm also going to bring you into the science to actually show you some of the details. So the big, heartfelt picture is always great, but it really comes down to like small, meaningful steps. And that's what we do. So, of course, we're dedicated to the global population of African elephants. And this is through research, conservation, and education. All of that, right? That's what we do. We're trying to save elephants from extinction so that we always live in a world where elephants exist. And a big part of this is inviting others to join us. So a nonprofit is owned by the community. So thank you. Like, this is yours. I don't own this. I'm just the voice of it. And so I'm inviting other people to join your organization. So I'm going to talk about elephants in zoos and in Africa. So I get this question all the time. Do you work in Africa or in zoos? We work for elephants. As individuals, as populations, doesn't matter if they're in a zoo or in Africa, because they all matter. And there's people that care for them. And so I'm going to talk about both and a little bit of the overlap of why both are so important and why we need to study and learn from both. Just some quick facts about elephants in zoos. So there's about 300 elephants in U.S. zoos. So there's African elephants and Asian elephants. I'm not going to talk about the differences, but they're just a breakdown of the numbers. So about 163 African, 138 Asian, just to kind of show the population. That's not a lot. So to me, each one of those elephants should be given best optimal care, and there's no reason that shouldn't happen. And zoos are doing that, and with more data and science, we can do that. But just kind of to show you. So when we talk about looking at this population, so I'm from Nebraska, which is why this organization is here. And I've always had since a child like this strong calling to work with animals in Africa. Like, who does that? Like, I grew up in a small farming community of 200 people, and I just always, from a child, wanted to do something with wildlife. So I did my master's at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, but then had this calling. They told me go to the Smithsonian to get your training for your PhD. And who does that from Nebraska, right? Like, I'm like, no, I can do it here. And after a while, years and years and years of working at the zoo and other places, I decided I needed to take that leap. So I'm telling you that is because part of that program at the Smithsonian and part of my PhD was looking at elephant reproduction and what we can do to really have a healthy population. And I was shocked to hear that within 50 years, elephants are predicted to go extinct in zoos. And that's based on we have more deaths than births on an annual basis. And to me, that's heartbreaking and not acceptable. Because what we know in Africa, a lot of those populations are just small, isolated populations as well. So we really need to learn how to understand and manage small groups of animals in a way that's sustainable. So to me, that's not okay, right? Like that, if we know that, like, we can change that. Part of the problem, so I really study reproduction, is that there are problems with their reproductive cycle. So for an animal to conceive, they have to have a reproductive cycle, right, where they can ovulate, release an egg. So at the Smithsonian Endocrine Laboratory, they've been studying elephants for years and found that the rates of elephants that have reproductive issues, like those that can't conceive, went up from 25% to 46% of the population in only 7 years, right? So now you're dealing with, like, you can't have sustainable populations if you can't have healthy reproduction, okay? The scary thing about this is that most of those elephants are of reproductive age. So there's good and bad. This whole talk isn't to be like doom and gloom, but just to give you some background. But you need to know where you are so you know what problem to tackle so we can move forward, right? And so zoos are on board with this. Like, okay, my elephant's not cycling, can't conceive, what do we do? And that's what we're doing, is like figuring out what to do. So this is where this hops in. So I'm an endocrinologist. People are like, what do hormones have to do with elephants? A lot. So endocrinology is the study of hormones. And hormones regulate reproduction, stress, nutrition, metabolic, diet. All of those things are really important to individual health. And so a lot of my work and the basis of for elephants is using hormones to really study individuals and populations. And I'm going to show you how we do that. So a lot of times it is very fun to look at elephants and study the outside, like their physical signs, but this enables us to look at them from the inside out, the physiological side, like what's actually causing poor reproduction, right? So we use hormones. We're based on hormones. So this gets into the fun part of how to actually test hormones in elephants. So if you go to a doctor, like you can get your blood drawn, right? So for elephants, we can draw blood from the ear, and the elephants, it's all positive reinforcement. If they want to participate in that, they'll put their ear through, we can draw blood. We can also collect saliva, urine, and my favorite, in which I do a lot of work with, elephant fecal samples. Luckily that is not how we collect them, but I have received entire boxes that big when I ask a zoo to submit elephant fecal samples for, they didn't know I just meant like a tiny bit. Yeah, not the entire bit. But these are different sample types that we can look at. The fecal samples are nice because they're non-invasive, right? The animal doesn't even know you're collecting them. And when we go to Africa here in a second, that's a lot easier, right? So we can collect fecal samples from elephants and get comparative data from the wild. So who knew you could learn so much from poop? So this kind of distorted a little bit with a little bit of our technical issues before we started. So on the bottom of it are just dates. Okay, what I'm showing you, and I'm not gonna show you a ton of graphs like this, but just to get an idea of, this is showing, you can see those ups and downs. That's a reproductive cycle for an elephant. So an elephant reproductive cycle, so like a human is about a month, 28 days to 30 days. An elephant's last 12 to 18 weeks. So about every 3 months, an elephant's capable of conceiving. So you break down that over a year, that's only 3 to 4 times a year. So right there, you don't have a huge opportunity. So what we're able to do is look at reproductive health of elephants in zoos. So we put together a nice profile, like who's cycling, who's not cycling. But this is what we're looking for, right? Because then we can, from this, we can know like when she's gonna ovulate, and that's when you want to put her with the male. Hopefully she's with the male all the time. For example, this is what we're looking at. We can also do this in fecal data. It's not nearly as clear. I've done this a long time, so I can pick out her definitive cycles. But what we're really aiming for, you see at the end here, how it just keeps going up and up and up. That's a pregnancy. And that's what we're aiming for. And we don't see that a lot. So just to kind of give you an idea of, this is a lot of poop samples, right? And we run it through our lab. And this is what we're doing, is we're seeing who's cycling, who's not. And if an elephant doesn't have a cycle, right, how I told you like they're not capable of conceiving, all this data is just like a flat line at the bottom, okay? So we see that quite often and we're trying to reverse that. So part of my PhD, Dr. Janine Brown is who I worked with at the Smithsonian, and she's looking at these rates of reproduction going down and down, and I like these big open-ended questions. She's like, we really need to look at what's causing this. And so did a huge study with a lot of zoos looking at all of these different things that might be related. So how they're managed, climate, nutrition, weight, relationships between elephants, to see if any of those were related to elephants not having that reproductive cycle. And it was so fascinating that the only thing that came out as like a positive thing that was related to not having a cycle was if an elephant had a high body mass index. So in humans, that's like your height girth ratio. And so it gave us a first inclination that maybe there's something going on with obesity or metabolic issues with elephants. But aren't elephants supposed to be big,
Yeah.
right? So this kind of really started to change our thought process. So diving into looking at obesity in elephants, or obesity and reproductive issues in humans versus elephants, we started to see the same things. So we lined up, like, this is what's associated with humans and obesity. Here are the problems we're seeing with elephants, and sure enough, some of them overlap. So we started to wonder if maybe we're feeding our elephants too well in a zoo population. Out of love, but maybe that needed to change. Just showing you, like, this is body mass index, right, in humans. So in elephants, did the same kind of thing. But you can imagine an elephant using a tape measure to get around those measurements. Yeah, we lost a lot of tape measures. So we knew that wasn't practical going forward. So being from Nebraska, doing my master's in animal science at UNL, I knew a lot about visual body condition scoring. That's what they do in cattle, horses. And so that got me thinking, maybe we should do something like that in elephants, right? Can we just visually tell if they have obesity issues? And how that works is you just look at those key areas on the species to see where they put on body fat. And typically that middle score, like a 3, is like your ideal, okay? And so this got me thinking, I should develop this for elephants. But how do you do that? I knew that it's likely a lot of the zoo elephants were gonna be on that heftier side. And so I needed to have enough elephants to span all of those different categories. So this is when I'm like, I really need to get to Africa and really study wild elephants. So I wanted to develop this tool so all of the zoos could assess their animals and know where we are. But that involved getting a lot of photos. And you have to validate it and do all the science behind it. But this was the premise of my PhD. So went to Africa. Now I didn't just go to Africa, right? Like I waitressed, cleaned houses, all of the things, because I couldn't get funding and grants for it. So as one does, if you're really motivated to do something, you find a way. So I went to Africa, met up with a wonderful woman and head of Elephants Alive, Dr. Michelle Henley, and we are colleagues and friends to this day, talking about this issue, and we joined forces, and I was able to work with them to get photos from free-ranging elephants. So we can really just start looking at obesity and potential body condition elephants. So these are just some photos, just to show you, just like humans, just like any species, there's various shapes and sizes, right? There's not a one size fits all for elephants. And you can just tell. So I started with just a table full of photos of elephants, just to start seeing if there's patterns of where they put on body fat. And so then I came up with key areas, right, of where you should train your eye to look for and to assess body condition in elephants. It feels kind of like disheartening, just like slide in 10 seconds, and each of these is like 2 years, 2 years, you know? But that's the process. At the end of this is the fancy African Elephant Body Condition Index. And here's details. Dana, I can send like links so people can have this if they're interested in it, so they can see it a little bit better. But same thing, so it's a 5-point method. The middle score is the same. You're really focused your eye on the backbone and the hip bone. And I'll send this so you can see more details. But it changed our thinking that you want to actually see skeletal features in elephants. And that was like kind of going against the grain when you go to a zoo. If you would see a backbone or hip bone, you might think that was an issue, right? But that's actually an indication of health. So just like the other scores, there's our 3, and you can see a little training and body condition there, that you actually see a backbone, right? And I put the picture of the one with the calf because I've also found that that's the body condition score we want for optimal reproduction. So you can kind of see really, really prominent backbone, and then the backbone disappears when you get to that 5 because that fat accumulates along that backbone. Which, And this is a flowchart. I'm a huge fan of a flowchart because when I was training people to use this, it was like, start here. Are the ribs visible? Yes or no? And then you just work through this, and then you can be a certified elephant body condition scorer. So you can go through the training. But this is how like zoos started to use this and train themselves so that we have a common language, right? We wanted, like, if your elephant's a 4 and yours is a 3, now we all know what that means. So it's really important to have simple resources built off of sound science, and that's what we do. This is just showing you some of the science behind actually using an ultrasound to measure fat, because I wanted to make sure what I was seeing was actually validated with some scientific meaning. So this ultrasound works like a tape measure almost, so it would give me a measurement of the fat layer. So I could look at all those different areas, and sure enough, I found that 5s had the most fat, then 4s, 3s, 2s. So that gave it like scientific meaning and not just a Kari says that's a 2. Very important, nobody just wants that. I'm just gonna show you a little bit of the data of our study to show you what the body condition scores were of the zoo versus our free-ranging elephants. So the zoo elephants are in the light gray, and the Africa elephants, free-ranging, are in the dark gray. So what you can see along the bottom is the body condition score. Let's just look at the ends. The body condition score 5, so the most fat. If you look at free ranging, very, very few elephants are in that score category, right? But when you look at the zoo, that light in category 5, the majority of elephants were there, right? So a clear showing of like there's definitely something different between the wild and the free ranging and the zoo elephants. And you can just kind of see the breakdown there. I'm just highlighting it, showing you that the most prominent body condition score in Africa was a 2. The most prominent body condition for zoo elephants was a 5. So a clear difference there. I wanted to show you this because, so there are body condition 5 elephants in Africa. Now I'm wondering too, like, why would that be so? Now this is a body condition 5 elephant in a zoo and in Africa. Well, you can see all the green around the elephant in Africa, so it's definitely resource-based. So elephants that are a 5 in Africa don't stay at a 5 for very long, okay, because it fluctuates with season. So once the drought hits, the rainy season is gone, they'll start to lose body weight very quickly. Okay, so an elephant in Africa doesn't stay at a 5. They have seasonal changes in body condition. Whereas an elephant in a zoo setting was always a 5, right? Because the feeding schedule was the same day to day. So the other part, I talked about the physical outside side. The other part are the hormones, right? These markers we look at that are related to metabolic issues, diabetes, insulin resistance. I won't go into all of the science, but these ones I found were related to reproductive and health issues in humans and other species. And I put this list up here because we see these same issues in elephants. So again, like an internal metric to look at, another way to look at elephant health. So part of this then was used on this very large study looking at elephant welfare. And this involved almost, except for like 2 zoos in the US. I'm not gonna go into a ton of details, this is a talk in itself. But this was the largest study done by the entire zoo community to really look at like, what does elephant welfare mean? Like, what are the most important things we should do? And to like, kudos to the zoos to say, like, raising their hand and saying, hey, now we know, like, we can make improvements. Let's work together to do this. And so we did this huge study. This complex thing is just showing you how complicated it was. Because you get 30 scientists in a room, that's what ends up happening. And then trying to break that down into bite-sized pieces, that was a challenge, but we did it. So we got a large grant from IMLS. I'm showing you this is because part of this was using the body condition score and the hormones to answer some of these questions. So we looked at all sorts of housing, social management, and then we looked at these outcomes like health, physiology, behavior. But what I wanted to show you is, we really needed those resources, sound tools to help guide those large programs, that large study. So same thing, the body condition score. So every elephant in North America was assessed for body condition score, which was fascinating. I'll show you the results. And then we really wanted to see, after all of this, I don't know how many years, 5-year study, we really wanted to see like what were the things, if zoos wanted to change, could they change to promote better health? So it was a huge study, and what we found, of course, body condition was related to reproductive issues. No surprise, we had that from a previous study. But we wanted to look at then was also all of these things. Like if we want to fix reproductive issues and it's related to body condition, then you gotta take a step back and say, well, what's related to body condition, right? Can we fix body condition to improve reproduction? Like it just never ends, right? So we were on a mission to do that. I want to show you one slide that what we found is that if you improved body condition of an elephant, so if you had 5s or 4s and they went down, one of the things that if it was a body condition score of 5, that female was 3 times more likely to not be cycling. That's a huge, huge probability there. So if we reduce her body fat, right, hopefully she could resume cycling, and that's where we are right now. So just showing you some results of where the zoo elephants fit in on this. So 22% were at the ideal body condition 3, 34% were body condition score 5, and collectively the 4s and 5s, so the overweight, 74% of zoo elephants were in this overweight category. The interesting thing about this, these rates of obesity and overweight mirror obesity rates for humans and our companion species, cats and dogs, which is just kind of fascinating that, I mean, you know, zoos and our management were loving them through food in a way, right? So just understanding that this is where we are and now we can work towards fixing it. I'm not going to break it down into the African and Asian. So I'm going to show you just the 4 things now that we're working with zoos to improve. So exercise, right? So this isn't like mind-blowing, like yes, you need an almost $1 million grant to prove that exercise is good for elephants. But yeah, and so this is exercise. One of the things we needed was, yeah, you actually have to have direct ways to exercise your elephants. And yes, elephants can swim. Isn't that cool?
I was going to ask.
Yeah, right. Yeah, ask any questions during that as well. So we really want to look at like how much exercise do they need? Like we want to know that about ourselves, right? So we found that if the elephants would exercise 14 hours a week, so that's 2 hours a day, that would decrease the likelihood of a high body condition score. Now that got zoos like, we can't commit to 2 hours a day, right? But think of in the wild. We're going to come to Africa here in a second, is because I'm really trying to take information from our studies in Africa to implement new strategies and management practices into zoo elephants. So taking what we know about their natural history and what they do, and it's a jump, it's a leap for zoos to do this, but really thinking like how can we do more of those natural things in a zoo environment? We need to do it. The study proves that we need to do that. But what we found as a follow-up study is instead of doing 14 hours a week of exercise, you can actually just do 20 to 30 minutes a day of more high-intensity exercise for that elephant and get the same results. So again, it's really trying to work with what we have. Like if you can't commit to 2 hours a day, what can we do? And let's work for the elephant's best health to do that. So one of the other things we looked at, feeding schedule. So what I noticed in Africa is, of course, they're not fed at 7 a.m., 12 p.m., 4 p.m., right? And then you know the world shuts down. People go to bed and then they go eat the next morning. No, they eat 24/7. They eat around the clock, not just during the day. So one of the things we looked at was how predictable is their feeding schedule in a zoo, right? So it's very scheduled or random. Sure enough, if you implement a very unpredictable feeding practice, their likelihood of being overconditioned goes down. So this is also changing. So instead of feeding at 7 and 12 and 4, think about where you can implement unpredictable feedings. Again, trying to mimic natural history and behavior. Same thing with training. It's really important to train your elephants in zoos for proper husbandry, medical care. But of course, if you have a lot of training that actually led to more over-conditioned elephants. Of course, because they're training and they're giving them their best treats. So now we work with zoos to look at lower glycemic, so lower sugar content treats, small changes, right? So what we do is we break things down into small, practical things. And zoos are all on board. Like, yes, we want to make changes. Yes, we want to do things right. And so instead of, like, for example, maybe an entire apple, they'll split it into quarters, right? And just so the same reinforcement, you're not denying an elephant, you're just splitting it up, and so they're not getting that concentration at one time. Okay. Another thing was number of feedings. So again, the spectrum shows you the variability in zoos. So some zoos were feeding once a day, and some all the way to 20 times. One zoo was 20 times a day. We'd love to see more facilities go there. The average, was 6 times a day. So what we found is like, okay, instead of thinking about, we never want to deny an elephant food, right? They actually need to eat all of the time. But what if you take whatever they're fed in a 24-hour period and take that amount, instead of 6 feedings, you divide it into 8 feedings, right? So same quantity, but just more feedings. And it's fascinating that for every feeding you increase, you decrease the likelihood of being overconditioned very significantly. So if you go from 6 to 7 and 7 to 8, you have a 20% chance of reducing that likelihood of. So this is just, again, taking our info from our field program and like how can we do this for individual elephants. That's just summarizing what we did. So the next step then, so that was a bit of the PhD work, postdoc work, and then maybe some of you know that in March of 2016, there was a group of 17 elephants coming from Africa to be imported into zoos. And part of this, a lot of reasons, but part of it, yes, was a sustainability issue of we needed more younger, our zoos needed more younger, reproductively viable females. And to me this was, okay, if we do this, not that I had a say, but to me it was like, if we do this, we need to commit to this group of elephants to not put them in the same position as we see elephants currently, right? We can't let them to get to a non-reproductive. With what we know, that's not okay. So I wrote a lot of grants. I knew these elephants were coming, and I wrote a lot of grants, worked with a lot of people to get money to monitor each one of these elephants the moment they stepped foot in the US. So we could really study them and help them and base management on what they need. So that was a lot. So some of them went to Omaha's Henry Zoo, some went to Dallas, and some went to Wichita, Kansas, Sedgwick County Zoo. And I still work with all 3 facilities in some way or not, some form. But that was a 5-year study looking at all of those elephants. That's a lot of elephant fecal samples. And I'll just show you a little bit of the end product of that. But this is the bridge, right, between Africa and zoos, and if we're going to do it, let's do it right, based on the data that we have. We can't ignore that. So now let's get over to Africa. I mean, this is what people really want to hear, right? So I have been going to Africa since that initial study, and that was 10 years ago, and I haven't stopped because I just realized how much you actually need to sit and learn and listen to elephants. They will tell us what they need if we're going to change standards for zoo elephants. So a lot of my premise was I wanted to make changes, and I'm committed to making changes with zoos to have more naturalistic care based on actually what elephants need. But what I found is all of our zoo stuff was based on standards in zoos, not based on free-ranging elephants. So really changing our standards. So where do you do that? You don't base it off of zoo elephants that we have high mortality, low reproduction. You do that off of a population of healthy elephants, and that's in Africa. And so I was committed to doing this. So I work with this great program called Elephants Alive. They actually collar, this is a GPS collar on this elephant, and that helps them track and monitor this elephant to look at their movements. So they can see their movements, where they go, their social dynamics, who they hang out with. It's such a database. So this team also So now they know these elephants, they go out every day, they also collect fecal samples. So we can look finally at hormones from free-range in elephants, from males, females, calves, and across different seasons. So what I'm finding, and not surprising, these hormones change with season. So I'm trying to promote within zoos, looking at seasonal feedings, changing how we feed over season. And I'm also trying to promote larger herds, right? And if a zoo can't do that, I'm there to help them have the conversations of maybe zoos work together to actually have less zoos with elephants, but larger herds, right? So maybe one zoo can commit, 2 zoos can work together, right? Those program funds go together. I'm saying that is because you need multi-generational. You need moms, babies, grandparents, males, females. How do you do that? I think you can. But now we just have to change that. So this is where Africa comes in. So the collar elephants, that's me and Dr. Henley down there. And I have to tell you though, collaring an elephant, I cry every time because it's not, we don't want to have to do that, right? Like it's emotional, it's like nobody wants to dart an elephant, and like their family is so protective in the most beautiful way. But this is how we're able to protect them, learn from them, study them. This process they've done a million times, it's so quick. After, of course, they monitor the elephant, so it's very safe for the elephant, but the amount of information and amount of support and protection they get by having a collar is huge. But if we're gonna do that, it's our obligation, responsibility to learn as much as we can. And so we partner for elephants, partners with Elephants Alive to do that, to understand their movements, their social structures, what they need, and finally set a new database to set new metrics for zoo elephants and elephants in any managed care. So this is, I'll show you a little bit of our lab space. So imagine me, crate by crate over 10 years of just bringing all of my lab stuff to Africa. That's what it looks like. It's me and my 2 daughters, and you know, everybody can have 3 checked bags, and so it's crate after crate after crate after a lot of my own money, and then eventually, you know, making the nonprofit to help with this because it was so important. And it's not just to get information to improve zoo elephants. That's the thing. It's to provide information and help Africa and people there, and setting up a new way of looking at elephants from endocrinology. That didn't exist. So it's like bridging the gap, right? We're working together. So that's South Africa. So we're in South Africa, outside of Kruger National Park. This is, so we actually have, this is, it's called Micah Village. So that's the offices. This is dorms. So now bringing students with us, student groups, because you learn so much about elephants, but you learn so much about yourself, right? And it gives clarity about your mission and what you want, and how you can actually make a difference. And so, yeah, so we bring students. And a lot of it, say we're just gonna go out and sit and watch elephants all day. And it never gets boring, right? Like you learn, like they're so loud, and how they eat, and like they play, and their interaction. Like you just learn, you have a whole new perspective. And so this is part of our facility, but this is mostly what we do, right? So this is, so on the vehicles is actually the tracking device. So you'll hear a beep, like a louder, more consistent beep when it's pointed in the direction to pick up an elephant with a collar, and then we can drive to the vehicle to find the elephant. So Elephants Alive has this fantastic database. So they know all of the elephants by different markings in their ears, so they know individuals. It's just fantastic. But for this side, the collaboration is they also know each poop sample, who that came from. That's important, because now we can finally look at how long do they actually have a reproductive cycle, to what age? How many babies can they have? How often are they pregnant? What does testosterone look like in the males? What are their stress levels? So yeah, it's a lot of collecting poop, putting it in freezer bags, and then it sits there and waits until me and my team get there. Yeah, David.
Okay, if they're not there watching that elephant
Yeah.
having a movement, how do they know?
They actually sit there and watch it.
Okay.
So yeah.
So they only collect what they have seen.
They actually do collect them. So for example, if we're doing a study looking at, let's just look at stress levels in this area, they can pick up any poop, right? And we'll just say, look at stress or whatever in this area versus that area, but not look at individuals. But the whole goal is really to look at individuals over time.
Okay.
Because matching hormones do those change with if the elephants expand their herd, if a baby's born, if a male comes into the group, right? So really matching the social stuff with the hormone data. But yeah, they seriously watch, bless their hearts, right? And you don't just then run out of the vehicle to pick up a poop sample. You wait patiently, which could be hours, until they move off to a safe place. I know, what commitment, right? Like, such commitment.
And primarily they eat leaves?
Yes, grass, yeah, vegetarian, yep, herbivores, so grass, stems, bark, trees, anything that they can, anything green that they can reach, yeah. But a lot of roughage. So this is another thing I didn't show in here, is working with zoos to really up their amount of browse. So the roughage, right, the trees, the sticks, that's really important to their digestion and their physiology, to slow down, you know, the digestion process.
African elephants probably don't get as much fruit.
Exactly. We don't actually need a lot of fruit for, yeah. So many zoos now only use fruit for special trainings. Yeah. So no longer is it jugs of grape juice or, so yeah. But you know, it's the thing, like when I talk to zoos about this, it wasn't like, oh gosh, I'm in trouble, I did this. It was like, wow, now we know. Let's work together and like brainstorm ideas. And that's the goal. Like we're all just trying to learn, right? And that's the cool, yeah. But browse, and the thing too of having the sticks and the trees, it's so good for them mentally. Like elephants are so smart, so they need that something to do, right? And if we're gonna feed them 24/7, you have to feed low quality, high quantity. So you do that by trees, and they like to strip the bark off, and it's a social thing. So they like to do that together, right? Like how humans go to dinner, socialize. Elephants love to socialize over stripping bark and eating branches. So it's a big part of their natural behavior. Yeah. Just some more photos. This was the first, that's me over there with my dad. So my dad is retired from education, and now he's great at weighing poop samples. So that's like our first samples we ran. And so you can see how like some of our stuff didn't show up, and like we're doing this. So, you know, that's just a very rough, like this is how research starts. You know, this isn't fancy by any means, but now we got fancy, right? With actually like lab benches and, but the point was like, we're getting the work done, right? Bit by bit, family member, my daughter's help. So it's just, it needed to be done. And it was very cute. So at Micah Village, this area they renovated for the lab, that's Gioni. He's fantastic. He did the renovation. And it was just also just a cool experience for that relationship and to give to them, right? So it's at Micah, they own Micah, and this brings something unique to them, right? And we came back from the field one day, and they had this cool little sign that said Kari's Lab, and it's just, and that will be the forever sign because it just means a lot, right? Like it just, yeah. And the amount of power and information that comes from that within those doors is amazing. Like it's the only one that exists. So it's just fascinating. So here, yeah, some initial stuff. My daughter's on the ground coloring. Yeah, and some of our team here. Just showing you like it's a journey. It's not like, let's do this and it's all established. But that's part of the beauty. Just some more photos. That's Ronnie. He's for Elephants Alive. Always collecting fecals with a smile for us, bless his heart. And just showing you more of, so these are some of the collared elephants. You can see the collar on those bowls. So just showing how bowl interaction is so important to have another bowl. So we're doing a lot of research for zoos to promote multiple bulls at a zoo. A lot of times a zoo will have one or no males, because you know, the thought that there's aggression and whatever, we won't go into that. But bulls need bulls to play with. Do that with and breeding, right? Like we see breeding all the time in Africa, and like it's just, yeah. And there's elephants around, right? That's big too. Elephants need to see other elephants breed. That's a herd dynamic. So go into that a lot. And just a bit too, we work closely with Kruger National Park, mostly elephants, but we also are starting to work with other species as well, right? Like if we can provide a unique expertise, specialty, why not help where we can, right?
Well, I know when you and I first started talking, you said that you did help with reproduction in other animals. Elephants is your first love, but
100%. So now lions, a lot of giraffes, dolphins, chimps, polar bears. I mean, if we have a unique, how do you say no? People want our help when we have this specialty. And this is part of where elephants now is part of our plan is really to teach people in Africa so that this goes on even when I'm not there, right? So be able to really put the infrastructure there that, I can help train and run it, but to be able to have this level of knowledge and information so they can make decisions is huge. So a lot of it's going to be directed towards Africa now, and how do we help, because we're all in this together. Just to end a little bit about our pregnancy research, how cool is that, right? It just, so now that we are, we're working towards more elephants having healthy reproduction. Now the next step is let's have healthy pregnancies, right? It never ends. So a lot of our research is on pregnancy and promoting optimal weight gain. So just like in any species, too high a body condition during pregnancy can have complications, right? So now we're doing studies to promote healthy, successful outcomes for pregnancy. So part of this is I also established a graduate program. So I was a student that I would have loved having an opportunity to study elephants and wildlife and endocrinology in Nebraska. And so I knew that part, long time ago, I was going to do that for students. So now for Elephants works with UNO for master's program. And UNL, we just have one of our graduate master's students is now, we just got a PhD program with UNL, and she'll pave that path starting this fall. But this is one of my graduate students' projects, looking at pregnancy. And we divide it into elephants that had miscarriage versus success. And the beauty about having banked samples, blood and fecals, you can go back and ask different questions. So we're able to go back to those samples and look at all those metabolic, obesity hormones to really see how can we promote more, less miscarriages, right? Let's have success. We do all that work to get them pregnant. Let's increase. So I'm just going to geek out here for a second because this is one of the cool take-home graphs is you see green, that's where we want to be. So what this is a prediction graph. And it shows us that if we look at the hormone called progesterone in an elephant, that's what we look at for pregnancy. We know if it's at these levels in the green, you have a 75% or higher chance of a successful pregnant outcome, right? So just like in humans, if a human's pregnant and you go to the clinic and they look at your progesterone, if it's low, sometimes they'll give you progesterone supplements or whatever because that will increase your odds of a successful pregnancy. But elephants, we're like, what are the healthy levels? Are there certain levels that miscarriage versus have a successful outcome? And so this project looked at that. So now we can really pinpoint if your elephant is pregnant and that by month 1, her level is this, it's looking great for an outcome. Or on the opposite side, if she's only at a 5 by week 35, if she's in the red, she's got only a 25% chance of that calf going to term. I won't go into the details, but really taking the science of the hormone data and a prediction. Now, we want that is because if we need to supplement or do something to promote successful pregnancy, that's what we need to be doing. And there's a lot more to this too, looking at the metabolic hormones, but just showing now we finally have knowledge of when to intervene or mitigate and when to not, right? Is it healthy, is it not? Again, just back to the details. And saying that, we talk about elephants in Africa, in zoos, but it's stepping back into those details. You have to get super focused on what might seem you're sitting there weighing a poop sample and you're like, how is this gonna save elephants? But what we've learned is small steps of really dedicated action, day in, day out. That's where we're seeing results. I mean, this is a journey. So a bit of a success story is now that we have worked with Omaha Zoo since those elephants got here 5 years ago, and do have a pregnancy from one of those elephants that were imported, which is fantastic. Her name is Claire. And so we're having an elephant baby shower on her behalf. And this is a free event. So it's virtual. We have lots of fun games and prizes. So if you go to 4elephants.org, and I can send this to you, Dana, so anybody can join. But it's a chance too to educate about calves and pregnancies and just to celebrate, like, just a very cool thing to be a part of and just to promote more of that. So right now we're working with very closely to monitor her weight gain, her hormones, just to promote successful outcome. And then we'll study her calf from day one, right? Like, we just need to put more science behind this. And then in Africa, right, that sets our precedent of this is what we should be aiming for. So we're working together. And then this is how 4Elephants runs, is our monthly giving program. So this is our Herd of Heroes. This is a $15 a month program. And yeah, we are a nonprofit, but we're also a business. And we don't run on passion alone, I wish, because we have plenty of that. But this is enable for people to join us. And when we say hero, people are like, well, what can I do with $15? Do I think $15 is going to change the outcome? No. But $15 from a large amount of people, yes. We can take those small steps together as a community and look what we can do. So that's our monthly giving program if you're interested. And then, but again, it's not mine, this is ours. And I feel so strongly about doing this from Nebraska for a few reasons. I'm from here, and I've always wanted to do something like this, and I want to be an example for other kids or students or adults who feel like I want to do that, but I can't because. I want you to like slash that because, and if it's strong enough, you find a way. And so this is why we do this as an example of just bridging that gap. Like, this is a global mission, and everybody can have some part of it. And so this is how we can do this together. So anyway, thank you for listening. And the people that are here and virtually, if you have questions, yeah.